All right, good morning. Welcome to the Sunroom. I'm Scott Bedgood, and this is Scott Bedgood's Sunroom Storytime. I am starting this podcast to tell stories from my life. I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm a journalist, I'm a dad, I'm a traveler. I'm someone who has sought a lot of excitement and adventure throughout my life, and I have a bunch of stories. Some of them I do tell on stage, and some of them aren't really good for stage, but are better for a longer format where I don't have to try to be funny and tell jokes every few minutes or every few seconds, actually. So that's why I started this podcast. I started it also to be able to interact with people. So I really would love to hear from you guys in the comments. My email is scott@bedgoodmarketing.com. And I want to hear from you guys about, my stories. Do they remind you of something in your own life? Do you want to hear other stories similar to the ones I've told? Please be very interactive. Do all the liking and subscribing and all of that. That would be very, very helpful. But today's story is going to be about starting stand-up comedy. I'm going to do one story per episode, and that is what I'm addressing today, is how I got into stand-up comedy. But every episode will be a different topic, a different story, some from as far back as college, some from, last week, if there's something really interesting. So I'm really excited about Sunroom Storytime. I have this great sunroom here outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I live, and I love sitting in here, and I love talking, and I want to bring you guys all into that. So we're going to get into our first story. I will tell you, if you're watching on YouTube, it will be a little bit jarring because here in Chattanooga, we are on the edge of Eastern time, and we've already gone through we've already gone through daylight savings time, or whatever. We sprung forward. So it's extremely dark in the mornings when I record this. So when we jump to the story, it's going to go back in time to when I recorded the story a few minutes before. It's going to be pitch dark in here, but I did want to record the intro with the sunrise, with the actual nice ambiance of sitting in the sunroom telling the story. And eventually the sun will start coming up earlier, and these will all be recorded in the light. But I did want to have my intro in the light. That means nothing to you if you're listening in your car, but if you are watching on YouTube, I did want to explain why everything suddenly gets really dark. But let's jump into it, because I want you to hear the story first before you do any liking and subscribing and commenting or anything like that. I want you to trust me that I can do this. So let's get into your first story. This is Sunroom Storytime. So this is actually the question I get asked the most of any question that anyone asks for me about all the things I've done. Everyone always wants to know, how did you get into stand-up comedy? That's a question I get all of the time. I think any stand-up gets that question. I think maybe I get it a little bit more because my path is a little different than others. I started comedy in a life stage that is not conducive to stand-up comedy. In fact, I heard Dusty Slay the other day talk about, somebody had asked him, they were writing a book about a 40-year-old getting into comedy. And they were kind of asking, sort of, tell me a little bit about what that would be like. And Dusty was kind of like, that's not a good idea, basically. Well, I was 31, so not 40, but still I had one young son. I had been married for almost 10 years. I had a job. I had all kinds of things. And I will be 100% honest with you. I never had a plan. I never thought it would go anywhere or be anything or affect my life in any way. I thought it was just like a little hobby that I was starting. Maybe not even a hobby, just something that I could do once and then say I was done with it. But before we get into that, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself, since this is the first episode and you may not know anything about me. So I grew up in Tyler, Texas, a town of about 100,000 people in East Texas. And all I ever wanted to be was a journalist. I wanted to be a sports writer. And my first job was I worked at the Tyler Morning Telegraph when I was 15 years old. And I would type little stats, and I would just kind of do all the little jobs that the sports section needed me to do. eventually they let me do real writing, and I actually got to cover the Little League State Championship one year, and that was the year that 12-year-old Patrick Mahomes and his team from the Tyler area was in the state championship. They did not win, but everyone knew, like, hey, this guy is going to be, a star. He hadn't played football yet, so we thought it was baseball, but I'll tell that story another time. So I go to the University of Oklahoma. I get a journalism degree, had a great time there. I met my wife. We got married. And I wanted to be a sports writer. But in 2013, when I graduated, all those jobs were drying up. Everything was just really weird. And so I couldn't find a direct job in sports journalism. And I moved to Dallas with my buddies. And this is before I got married. I moved to Dallas with my buddies, and we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of crazy, stupid things that are going to come up later in this podcast. Like we became super fans of the local high school team. And by super fans, I mean we joined their private Facebook group and just wrote really encouraging, stupid messages to the kids. And it went off the rails pretty quickly. And that's going to be a fun story that you'll hear another episode in this podcast. But moved to Dallas and couldn't find a job in journalism, so I just had to take different jobs here and there, and different, working at startups and working at all kinds of things. And so I did eventually work at an insane startup, and that actually did get me a connection. And I worked with the National Football Foundation. That's where my book here, Lessons from Legends, where I interviewed 12 college football Hall of Fame coaches, available on Amazon. That's super cool. It was super fun. I actually did get to live a lot of those sports journalism dreams, but not really a sustainable career. And so I was always working for different startups, but comedy was just never anything I considered. I just wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to find jobs that could pay the bills. And so I did a lot of freelance writing. I wrote for a lot of magazines: Success Magazine, Texas Monthly, Texas Highways, Cowboys and Indians Magazine, and a lot of other publications. And I got to do really cool stories. And my favorite stories that I ever got to do always involved me doing something that embarrassed myself, that hurt me, that put me in uncomfortable situations. Things like I wrote an article for Success Magazine one time where it was supposed to be about this like cool startup, right? This guy who is this entrepreneur. And the thing he had invented was a bracelet, a watch, a wearable that would come close, shock you, electrically shock you if you did something bad. So that's what I was doing for this story. Was I was wearing a wearable that would give me an electric shock if I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. Like, for example, if you wanted to stop, they said touching your face, but let's be honest, picking your nose. If you reached your wrist towards your face, it would shock the heck out of you. And that hurt so bad. One time, I was picking up my infant son, and it shocked me, and I almost dropped him. And it was just such a ridiculous product that I couldn't write like a glowing review of the product or talk about how cool the entrepreneur was. I was like, I hate this thing. And so I wrote a very funny story, a very free-flowing story where I was just like, I got to get in a flow state and just write this thing and just embarrass myself and just make it silly. And I did, and it worked. And it was probably, at the time, the best article I'd ever written, because of it was really kind of tapping into what made me me. And so I liked being able to really be funny in my writing, and I've always liked being funny. I mean, maybe I was destined to be a stand-up comedian because I did win funniest in my high school out of class of 52. Actually, I was funniest guy, so it was out of 26. So destined for greatness is what I'm saying. But I really liked being funny in my writing. It was the first time I really started to stretch that muscle in my writing. Usually my writing is kind of serious. If you go back and read a lot of the things I've written there, it's the only way I can be serious. I can't talk about serious things, but I can write about them. And it was really fun to put myself in those situations. So I started doing more of those stories. I did one for Cowboys and Indians magazine where I went out to the Cleburne Railroaders, which is an independent baseball team. And I guess batting practice. I was the mascot for a few innings. And that was, again, another one of those really fun, funny stories. And so I realized like this is where my strength is. This is where I like to be as a writer and as a communicator. So I started my own newsletter called Trial and Error, where I would purposely put myself in these situations, put myself in scary, painful situations, and then write about it. I did cryotherapy. I did one of those like isolation tanks, like that terrified me. I was a beekeeper. And I had this list, and on that list was try stand-up comedy. I've always been a fan of stand-up comedy. I always liked it. I would kind of write jokes in my notes sometimes, but I never thought about doing it in any way. I didn't even know how it worked. I'd never actually been to a comedy club. I've been to large comedy shows, but I've never been to a comedy club. And so I had it on the list, and it was by far the thing I was the most afraid of. Like, for example, I'm terrified of needles. I don't like needles at all. I 1 month tested out this thing that's like a glucose meter, and it's like what a diabetic would wear, but not for diabetics. It's just for like managing your blood sugar throughout the day as like a health thing. It was a startup that had started this, and they had an app and all this stuff. And so they sent me one, and I was injecting myself with a needle that stayed in my arm for a month before I tried stand-up comedy. That's how much stand-up was a fear of mine. But then I ran out of all the other ideas. And so there was a month where I realized I have to do stand-up because it's on my list. And if I can't come up with anything else. And I did some research. I found that Backdoor Comedy Club in Richardson, Texas, just outside of Dallas, was the oldest open mic in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It was a clean open mic, and it was the one that, from the research I had done, seemed like the best. I mean, and frankly, all my research was online. I didn't talk to anybody who knew anything in Dallas. I didn't know anybody in comedy or who'd ever really done comedy. I had one friend who did comedy in Oklahoma City, and I did ask her a few questions. Stephanie, shout out to you. But I didn't even tell my wife, and this is true. I signed up for it a couple weeks in advance. And then I told my wife like the night before, I was like, hey, I'm going to go do something tomorrow night. And I can't tell you what it is. And I was like, you just got to trust me. It's not sketchy, but if I talk to you about it, I won't do it. Like I'll get embarrassed. I'll sketch out. I have to just like keep silent and then go do it. And I think really the thing that I was most afraid of, not necessarily with my wife, but with kind of everyone in my life, and it's not any insult to them, I just was embarrassed at the idea of holding my hand up and being like, hey, I'm funny. Like, I think I'm funny. I went to a stage and I stood in front of strangers and told jokes because I'm so funny. I thought they would think it was weird that they would be like, dude, you're not that funny. Like, you're funny like when you're in a group, but so are all of us, right? I was embarrassed by that. I just like, there was something about the idea of admitting to trying to be a stand-up that I just couldn't handle. And so using the newsletter was kind of a shield against that, because my thought was, well, if I go do it and it goes really poorly, what I can do is, I'm going to write about it and I'll be funny in the writing and I'll just embarrass myself. I'll make fun of myself for even thinking I could try something like this, right? That was the shield that I used to allow myself to do this. And so I was ready. I worked on my bits. I had, really practiced. You get 3 minutes at Backdoor. I really practiced getting my 3 minutes down. I was pretty solid on it. And Backdoor has rules, right? It's a clean open mic. And so it's no cursing, no sex humor. Like, you can mention it, but they were like, just don't hump the stool, right? Like, don't get explicit with it. And I was like, that's easy, because that's what I was going to do with comedy anyway. That's how I talk in general. Like, so being clean was the route I was going to take as a comedian all the time. And in fact, some of the people that really inspired me to think even just a little bit about like, oh, I could do comedy was like the Nate Land podcast. I'm a big fan of Nate Bargatze and Brian Bates, Aaron Weber, Dusty Slay. those guys showing me that like you can be really successful in this world being a clean comedian. Because I mean, my other favorite comedians, obviously I like, Jim Gaffigan, but I mean, I memorized like Aziz Ansari's I think it was like his 2010 album. Like I'm not like a fan of just clean comedy, and I was just in this world where I was in this mindset, like I don't know if I could even be funny enough compared to non-clean comics, and seeing those guys was an inspiration. But I never thought that I would be a comedian by any stretch of the imagination, even when I was going into this open mic. But I had really practiced my 3 minutes, and I was really good on it. And then the night before, I got what I thought was like a godsend, because I had gone to an event and I had valet parked my car. I know that sounds fancy, but it was the only option because it was downtown Dallas. And that's one of the worst parts about downtown Dallas. But I get in my car afterwards and I close the door, and it's like busy downtown Dallas streets. I don't go down there very often. I don't know how to navigate. I'm so confused. And I realized that the valet driver has farted in my car. And it smelled terrible. Like one of the worst smells I've ever smelled in my life. And so I'm like barely able to breathe. I'm literally trying to roll my windows down while merging onto like a busy street and trying to turn left, just trying to do all these things. And the thing I'm like most concerned about is like if I'm going to die in this car. Like I got hotboxed with a fart by a valet driver. And I was like, what a perfect joke. So once I recover from that, I'm like, all right, I got to figure out how to wedge this into my 3 minutes. This is perfect. Like I'm going to blow the roof off this place. And that is the thing that I will say, like of all the fears I had, I never really had a fear that I wouldn't be able to come up with funny jokes, right? I've been a writer for, at this point, I've been a writer for basically 20 years, but at that point, it was, 15 years, whatever. So I knew how to write, and I thought, okay, I know how to write. I don't know if I know how to write jokes, but I know how to be funny. And so I was pretty confident in that. I didn't know how I would be able to deliver on stage. I didn't know how the venue would be set up and all of that, or what the crowd would be like. But I was pretty confident that I could come up with some funny stuff. And this was like, okay, the perfect ender. So I'm really nervous. I go to backdoor, and I check in, and they realize I'm new. And so they're like, hey, if you're new, you're going to go at the end. I actually went second to last. The guy who went after me had lost his fantasy football season, and this was his punishment. So all his boys were there, and I just remember thinking, oh, what I'm doing is a punishment for most people. So that's really encouraging. But they were like, hey guys, if y'all are new, here are the rules. They were like, no cursing, no explicit sex jokes, and no bathroom humor. And I was like, wait, bathroom humor? That's kind of gonna ruin my whole ender. And I remember asking the guy who was running it, it was Reggie French, who's a great Dallas comic. I said, okay, I got this joke, and this valet driver, he farted in my car. I mean, is that bathroom humor? It was in my car. That felt like a Mark Norman, the way I just reacted right there. But Reggie said, well, it just depends on how much you describe the fart. And I was like, okay, this is weird. So now I'm nervous about all that. And I go outside, and the other comics realized that I was a new comic, and they were really, really nice. A guy named Jake was really one of the first people to kind of bring me over to the group, and we had a good conversation. And then I'll always remember Rocky Deer, one of my dear friends. He could tell I was like a deer in headlights, and he came up to me and he was talking to me, and he was like, hey, like my main advice, like don't worry if you bomb. And I kind of looked at him, and my first thought was, I never even thought about bombing. I was so worried about all the other things and about what people would think outside of that room. I hadn't even considered the fact that people inside that room might not laugh at all. No, it's not being arrogant. I just didn't even know how this worked. I just thought like everyone kind of got laughs, like people were there for a comedy show, and I I had some decent jokes. So I thought, why you could bomb? I couldn't process all of this. And he said, what he was saying was, don't really worry about how the reactions are out on that stage tonight, because it's an open mic and it's mostly comics and they don't laugh. It's really about, do you feel comfortable on stage? How is your delivery and those kind of things? And you'll want to come back if you feel comfortable. Don't worry about the amount of laughs. And it was great advice. But I, at the time, was like, thrown for a loop. Now I'm worried about this whole fart thing, and I'm worried about, like, I could actually bomb. Like, I honestly didn't know that was a possibility. And I know that sounds ignorant, but I'm telling you, I'd never been in a comedy club before I stepped in to Backdoor for open mic. But going last and watching 50 other comics, I realized very quickly they do bomb. Like, most of them bomb at an open mic, and they were fine with it. They walk off stage, they fist bump each other, people tell them good job, and no one's like judging them, no one's rude, no one's upset. And that was honestly one of the biggest reveals of going to an open mic, was that it was actually a pretty welcoming environment. It was very diverse, ages, races, gender. I mean, just all kinds of, everyone was so different, and they were all just chilling and talking about jokes and telling funny stories. And it was a very eclectic mix. I remember one guy pulled out a stuffed animal from his backpack, put it on the stool, and interviewed it for 3 minutes. And I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I was the only one who thought that, but it was maybe the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, I realized as my time was about to come up that I would probably be okay. And I walked up there, and mostly empty except for that guy's bros who were there and a few other comics. But I walked up there and I just confidently delivered my first joke. I just said, my wife is white. I mean, my wife is obsessed with true crime podcasts. Those are kind of interchangeable terms. And that got a big laugh. Like, it got a big laugh in the context of an open mic, and I felt good, and I started rolling. And I'm, all my jokes looking back, obviously, like, the setup is too long, all these things, there's, problems with it. But for an open mic at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night, I was doing pretty well, and I'm rolling, and I'm like, I'm going for it. I'm going for the fart thing. Like, I am feeling good. Now it's 3 minutes. They give you a light at 2 minutes, and then they give you the crazy light at 3 minutes. Like, get off the stage right now. And I was rolling so good, I missed the 2 minute light. So I didn't know where I was. I'm like, man, I have gotten through this really quickly because I haven't seen a light yet. And so I'm like, I'm doing my fart joke. And I go, hey, this is true, but a valet driver farted in my car last night. And I had this whole runner I was going to do about, like, I got to go identify who did this so I could, make him pay for his crimes. And so I got to go back and quiz all the valet drivers about, like, what they ate, and then finally find the one that ate Chipotle. I don't know. I'm not even saying it was a good joke, but I was ready to do all this. And then the light starts going crazy, and the host, like, pops up on stage while I'm in the middle of the joke. And I was like, oh, okay. And I ran the light my first time. And I also don't know if they were kicking me off because I was doing a fart joke. I really don't know. But that actually did not feel good. And I thought, like, I've ruined my chances at fame and stardom. And then afterwards, they were like, no, great job, man. Yeah, you did really good. Just, look for the light next time. But yeah, the people were really encouraging. And so I wrote the story, and I published it on my newsletter, and people loved it. And the reaction, instead of being like, dude, that's so embarrassing that you would do something like that, it was like, yeah, we kind of, like, thought you would be doing this. Like, that makes sense for you and your personality and all of these things. And they were like, let me know when your next show is. And I was like, yeah, show. I did a show. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of thought that was like a show. Like, I didn't know anything about showcases. I didn't know anything about feature, host, any of that. I literally just, like, thought you kind of open mic'd for a while, and then you got opportunities as, like, a headliner. And I really had no clue. I didn't really look into it. I had no plan. And that's the thing I want to emphasize so much. I have no plan with this comedy thing. I don't know where it's going. I've never known where it's going. But I did one more open mic in January. So this was October of 2021. And I did another open mic in January 2022. And it was still kind of COVID time in the winter, and people just didn't show up. There was just nobody there that day, except a couple of friends, actually. And it just was not fun. It was not a good time. I didn't feel good about it. And so I kind of was like, all right, cool. I'm not like a stand-up. I'm not doing stand-up. And it wasn't until that summer that I thought, okay, I want to try this a little more. I'm going to try it again. And I went to another open mic, and I had a lot of fun. And then I went to another one pretty soon afterwards, and some friends came, and one of my friends, Estevan, he saw a mutual friend who is a comic named Sylvia McCallum, and he introduced us, and she was super nice. And a few weeks later, or a few days later, she reached out to me and said, hey, I'm actually getting an opportunity to do my first kind of headlining show where I'm putting together the lineup, and I would like, do you have 7 minutes? Now, I had been on stage for 12 total minutes, 4 open mics, 3 minutes each. She said, do you have 7 minutes of material? And I said, yes. Now, I have talked to Sylvia since, and she's like, I knew you were lying, but I just gave you the opportunity anyway. I thought I had duped her because I didn't tell her that was my 4th open mic. I was like, I'm a little new, but yeah, 7 minutes, yeah. I had a month to prepare, and I did prepare and did the show, and it went great, actually. I mean, it went really well. And it was super fun to be part of a real show. I was pretty dressed up for the occasion, but I felt good about it. And then a few days later, a friend from a former coworker texted me and said, hey, I'm putting together a show at my church. It's a fundraiser, and we're bringing in a real comedian named Jody Fuller, a great comic out of Opelika, Alabama. And he was like, do you want to open for him? And I was like, cool. Yeah. How much time do you need? And he goes, 15 minutes. Now, again, I had not even done 15 total open mic minutes before I got offered the 7-minute show. And 7 minutes was all I had. And I was like, yeah, I can do 15. And I said, is it paid? What am I thinking? I said, is it paid? This is my second show ever. I'm like, who's this? Could get that cash? And he was like, yeah. And I got $100 for it. My second show. Okay. This is ridiculous. It went well. I think I did 12 and a half minutes of the 15, but that's fine. It was a great crowd. It was actually really, really fun. And Jody is an unbelievable comic. Check him out. And so I started rolling from there, but I never have had with kids. I had one kid at the time, and then I had another kid in 2023, summer of 2023. I've never had just like a ton of free time. I've got kids, I've got job, I've got obviously a wife, I've got all kinds of other responsibilities. So the way my career has been built, it's been built on trying to take next steps every single opportunity I can get. I can't grind at open mics. I've got to reach out to people. I've got to try and make the next move every single time to keep moving at a kind of an exponential rate. And if you're not familiar with my comedy or anything about me, just to kind of give an overview of where I've been in the 3 years, basically, that since my first show. So my first show was September of 2022. And it is now, as we record this, March of 2026. So not even 3.5 years. I have done several theater shows with George Janko. I have gotten to become a regular at Nateland Live in Zany's Nashville, and even done a show there with Nate Bargatze himself. Have done shows with Brian Bates, who's also on the podcast. And as we'll talk about later, this weekend, I'm going to be touring, doing a couple shows with Dusty Slay in Paducah, Kentucky, and St. Louis, Missouri. I've had a really amazing sort of come up in it's been really an amazing few years, and all the opportunities I've gotten have come in really surprising ways. I mean, not only just Sylvia reaching out, but all the way up until like in September of this year, I got a DM from somebody I don't know, I don't follow, I did not have any background in, who said, hey, do you want to open for George Janko at the Walker Theater here in Chattanooga? And just to background there, I moved to Chattanooga in April of 2025. So from Dallas to Chattanooga. And I was like, I don't know who George Janko is. I've never done a theater show, but I'm not going to tell you that. I just was like, can you give me a call and kind of give me background on this? Because like, basically, I want to make sure this isn't a scam. Because it was like 3 days after that I was supposed to do the show. But anyway, I said yes. And the only reason they found me was because a few months before I had met a radio host, Gino Devaney, here in Chattanooga, who's involved in the improv scene. And we had hit it off well. And then when George's people were looking for someone to open for him, they needed a clean opener in Chattanooga. And they reached out to the improv account here in Chattanooga. And Gino runs that. And he was like, well, I know Scott Bedgood. And so they reached out to me. It's just one of those like God moments, right? Like God, kind of orchestrating this in my life and my career. And I don't want to try to overly spiritualize my comedy career, but just some of these opportunities are absolutely just outside my control. And I have to just keep saying yes. And that's why I talk about, like, people ask me, do you have a plan? Is this going to be the only thing you do? Is this, what is the goal here? And I don't know. I just keep stepping into whatever the opportunities are. So that is how I got into stand-up comedy. That's a little bit of where I'm at right now with stand-up comedy. And that is your first Sunroom story. Okay, so now we're going to jump into our second segment, which is Wiki Wondering. And now, this may remind you of a segment you've heard of before on a podcast from 10 years ago called The Thrivecast, hosted by me and Emily Treadgold, where back then I would just talk about what I had learned on Wikipedia that week, where I had wandered on Wikipedia. And this is going to be different because it's called Wiki Wondering. And it's the exact same segment because I think it's a great segment. Basically, I spend a lot of time on Wikipedia. I learn a lot of random things, and I have no one to talk to about it because my wife does not want to hear about it. So you're going to hear about it. So today, I'm Wiki Wondering, whatever happened to the whale from Free Willy? Okay, to start this off, I need to get real close. Okay, so come close. If you're listening, get close to the radio. If you are watching, lock eyes with me. I need to be honest with you. The only reason I was interested in this was because I got duped by a fake AI story on Facebook. And I know that makes me sound like your mom, but listen, this is what the story was, okay? It said that orcas were observed kidnapping seals and taking them to the sandbar and like keeping them on this sandbar, and then other orcas were patrolling as guards and not letting the seals get too far away. And basically the orcas were like storing the seals in like a concentration camp or like a grocery store. Like basically they were keeping the seals there, keeping them alive until they wanted to eat them. And I thought it was an amazing story because orcas, killer whales, are the straight up Nazis of the sea. They're the most evil animals because they're geniuses and they only use them for nefarious purposes. And I was like, this is incredible. And I sent it to my friends who are also orca fans. And then I started doing more Wikipedia research on orcas. And that's how we ended up on the page for Keiko, the whale from Free Willy. And so I just needed to get that off my chest first before we go into our Wiki Wondering, which is whatever happened to the whale from Free Willy? So Keiko was a Hollywood star of Free Willy. Remember that movie? Adorable, right? We made adorable kids movies about the Nazis of the sea, orcas. And then Keiko was a captive orca. He was a star. And the people, after watching the movie, the people in the ocean world, I don't know how to phrase that, humanitarians, are you humanitarians if you want to help animals? Animalitarians. People were like, we should actually free Keiko. Like, we made a movie called Free Willy, and we should free Keiko. Keiko wants to go back out in the wild. And I'm going to be honest with you, they did not ask Keiko about this. Keiko is a Hollywood star, okay? Keiko doesn't want to be out in the wild. But they didn't ask him. They were like, Keiko, we're going to free you, dude. We're going to put you back out with the wild orcas. Isn't that what you want? And he was like, have you seen wild orcas? You want me to go out there with them? So they take Keiko, they fly him to Iceland, and it doesn't go well. They land at the Vestmannaeyjar Airport, which is in the Westman Islands in the south of Iceland. And when they land at Vestmannaeyjar, the plane has a landing gear failure, causes $1 million of damage to the plane. So that's an inauspicious start. Keiko's fine. So they start to release Keiko. They put him in the harbor, and they're kind of really monitoring him. And he does not want to leave the people. He likes people. He doesn't like orcas. And so basically what it becomes is they're just taking him on walks. They literally say this in the Wikipedia page. They're taking him on walks, basically with like speedboats. They're like, come on, Keiko, get out in the harbor. And he's like, no, I'm a star. I need star treatment. Give me my fish. So Keiko's not doing great. And eventually, sadly, Keiko dies within 2 years of pneumonia. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know animals got pneumonia. I kind of thought that was like an us thing. I thought animals just like started feeling sick and then other animals killed them. I didn't know whales could just sort of die. I don't know. I'm not like an animal expert. But my favorite thing about this Wikipedia page, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, not to tell you a sad story, but to tell you that all of this could have been avoided if we'd all just listened to one man. And that man is Steinar Bastissen, okay? If we had listened to Steinar Bastissen, all of this would have been avoided. Keiko would not have died of pneumonia. People wouldn't have wasted their time taking him on walks in the harbor. And some people could have been fed, okay? I'm going to read this sentence directly from the Wikipedia page. It's my favorite sentence. The Norwegian pro-whaling, I'm going to start that over. The Norwegian pro-whaling politician Steinar Bastissen made international news for his statement that Keiko should instead be killed and the meat sent to Africa as foreign aid. Steinar was like, let's harpoon this dude, chop him up, send the meat to Africa. I'm going to keep the blubber for myself. I don't know what you do with blubber. Bathe in it, use it as lotion. I'm not sure, but Steinar wanted that blubber. And he was like, kill this thing. I'm not saying that Steinar was right. But I do think that would have saved a lot of trouble. And Steinar, if you're wondering, looks exactly like you think he does. I'm going to put the picture right here if you're watching. And if you're not watching, just imagine exactly what you think pro-whaling politicians in Norway look like. That's what Steinar Bastissen looks like. I took this picture, by the way, from his Facebook banner photo, his personal Facebook, it wasn't like a fan page. Like I found his real Facebook. And Steinar, sadly, did die 2 years ago, but his Facebook's still up there. And I took this picture from it because he looks exactly like you think he looks. And so that is a sad story about Keiko. But I also think maybe if we listened to Steinar, things would have been a lot better. And a village in Africa could have eaten for like a day. So the final segment is upcoming shows. And I will be with Dusty Slay this weekend. Very excited about that. Hitting the road with Dusty Slay. We're going to Paducah, Kentucky at the Carson Center on March 27th. And then we're going to be in St. Louis, Missouri. Actually, it's Chesterfield, Missouri, but outside of St. Louis at the Factory on March 28th. Very excited about this. Like I mentioned earlier, Dusty and Nate and Brian and Aaron, like those are guys that really kind of showed me that there is a path in comedy for clean comedians. And so I'm really excited to get to go out with Dusty and just, again, another step in the career that was totally unplanned. And I had no idea that this would ever be happening. And especially within 4 years of starting comedy, it is really, really exciting for me. I have a bunch of other shows coming up. I'm going to be in Panama City in May. I have some stuff going on in April, things that are going to show up here as stories, but no dates in April because I'm traveling a ton with family. But yeah, those are my upcoming shows. I hope to see you out on the road at some point. Please let me know what you think of the first episode. Write comments on the YouTube. Shoot me an email, scott@bedgoodmarketing.com. And yeah, just, and message me on Instagram, whatever you need to do. I just would love to hear, did you listen to the episode? What did you like about it? What do you want to hear from me? Are there stories that you know of from me that you want me to talk about on this podcast? And yeah, does this spur any thoughts in your mind? Have you thought about anything that you want to tell me, or any stories that you think would be interesting for me to share from you on the podcast? Please write those comments. Do all the like and subscribe and all of those things. They're really helpful, especially early on as I'm trying to build this. I would really love all that. And I want to give a special shout out to Brother in the Haze, who's the band that I'm using in the theme, the song Back to Chattanooga. That is David, who lives here in Chattanooga, and Jenny Hayes, who lives in Nashville. Jenny Hayes and I go way back, and she will definitely show up in one of these stories at some point, but I should probably get permission before I tell it from her. But we had a group of friends in college, and we got into some hilarious situation that I do want to talk about, because I haven't really fully ever shared it on stage or anything like that. And it's going to be a good story, but we'll save that one for later. But yeah, for now, do all the things I told you and listen to Brother in the Haze, because they're an awesome band. So yeah, this has been the first episode of Sunroom Storytime. Oh my, it's been a long time. Oh